Greeting of the day to all. Today topic is Introduction to Visual Basic. In this topic, we will cover the following subtopics: Visual Programming Language, Visual Basic as Programming Language, History of Visual Basic as Event-Driven Programming, Characteristics of Event-Driven Programming, Features and advantages of Visual Basic interface, integrated development environment, and Visual Basic environment. First of all, we know about what is programming. Before discussing visual programming language, we know about programming. So, what is programming? So, programming is the process that makes it possible to create computer software, application, and websites. Currently, computers are unable to think for themselves. They require user to give them sets of orders, instructions to know what to do. This referred to as code. Most of the resources you use on the computer and internet are made with code. Programming is a core element of the digital technology curricula because it helps students to develop essential skills such as problem solving, logic, and critical thinking. So, programming is a very important part. So, visual programming. What is visual programming? In visual programming, a programming language that lets users create programs by manipulating program elements graphically rather than by specifying them textually. Visual programming is a graphical based programming. Visual programming language allows programming with visual expressions, structural arrangements of text, and graphics. The benefits of visual programming. Visual programming is a common metaphor, represents statements and control structures as graphics blocks that can be composed to form programs, allowing programming without having to deal with textual syntax. So, visual programming environment provides all features that are required to develop a GUI as ready to use component. Aims at providing the user with interface that is intuitive and easy to use. A visual programming language that allows the user to specify a program in two or more dimensional way. Conventional textual languages are not considered two-dimensional since the compiler or interpreter processes them as one-dimensional stream of characters. So, visual programming language allows programming with visual expressions, spatial arrangement of textual and graphical symbols. So, visual expressions, graphics, drawings, animations of icons. So, these languages are those which use a graphical GUI builder to make programming interfaces easier. The main idea behind visual programming is that using pictorial representation for programs and opportunity to apply the GUI technique. So GUI, what is GUI? GUI is graphical user interface that allows a user to interact with a computer program using a pointing device that manipulates pictures on a computer screen. The small pictures are called icons. Various types of pointing devices can be used, such as a mouse, stylus pen, and a finger on a touch screen. The GUI program is very different from a program that uses a command line interface, which receives user input from typed characters on a keyboard. So, GUI is user friendly. So, now we discuss about what is Visual Basic. Visual Basic is a programming tool. Visual Basic is a programming tool. Visual Basic is a programming tool that allows user to develop Windows or GUI applications. So Visual Basic is a programming language that Visual Basic is a programming language and development environment created by Microsoft. It is an extension of basic programming language that combines basic functions and commands with visual controls. Visual Basic provides a graphical user interface GUI that allows the developer to drag and drop object into the program as well as manually write program code. So Visual Basic, also referred to as VB, is designed to make software development easy and efficient while still being powerful enough to create advanced program. So Visual Basic is very easy and understandable and human friendly language. Visual Basic applications which are often developed for gaming, and Visual Basic is available as a streamlined application that is used primarily by beginning developers and for educational purposes. So in C and C++ and other languages, for we write a large code for a small component, but in Visual Basic the burden of writing the code is almost relaxed because everything is available. Here we just give the instruction what the particular event will do when the trigger is fired. Means Visual Basic is much enhanced version of enhanced version of basic language. The difference is that VB can create Windows program by just drag and drop. There is a facility of drag and drop. There is a toolbox in in visual programming. There is a toolbox where different kinds of tools are available. We choose that particular tool that we require. So the history of Visual Basic I already explained about basic. The Visual Basic is derived from basic. The basic means beginner's all-purpose symbolic instruction code is a family of general purpose high-level programming language whose design philosophy emphasizes ease of use. The original version was designed by John and Thomas of Dartmouth College in 1964. The main purpose of BASIC was to help people learn how to solve their problems. In 1991, Microsoft introduced Visual Basic. The approach for connecting the program language of the graphical user interface is derived from a system called Tripod, sometimes also known as Ruby, originally developed by Alan Cooper, which was further developed by Cooper and his associates under the contract to Microsoft. So this programming language, the main purpose of teaching programs and developers how to design graphical user interface programs easily. So the main purpose of VB is to interact with graphical programming language. It is a pure graphical and event driven programming language, very easy and understandable. So what is event and event procedures? An event is an action recognized by an action such as clicking the mouse, pressing a key. These are the events. For example, I press the enter button. This is an event. I press the enter button. For example, I switch on the fan button. This is an event that I press the button of fan. And what is event procedure? Event procedure is a selection of code that is executed when an event takes place. Event procedure can be added to our project in the code editor window. So this is the example of an event driven programming language, VB as an event driven programming language. So for example, we think something in our mind. We think that we feel very hot today, so we want to switch on the fan. Then we think, then what will we do? We press the switch, we press the button of fan, and then the fan will automatically run. It means then we just press the button of fan, just on the fan, then an event is happened and a trigger fired and fan will automatically run. So event, this is the process. Event, then a trigger fire, event handler, and the event loop. It will execute. So Visual Basic is an event driven programming. Here, for example, we want to create a login page. We choose two label boxes, two text boxes, and a command button. One label we give the name username, one label the another one we give the password, and there are two boxes, one for username, one for password, and there is a button, command button. Here we write submit. When we click on the submit, then what will we want? We want to log in. Our expectations is to log in. So this, when we click on this button, command button, this is called event. Clicking the command button is an event. So that's why Visual Basic is totally event driven programming language. So events, the examples I already given: pressing the keyboard button, movement of mouse, click of a mouse button. And what about the procedural languages? Procedural languages run from start to finish with no human interventions. Procedural languages are COBOL, BASIC, Fortran, C languages. So some key characteristics of event-driven programming languages are: event handler. Event handler is the code you write to respond an event. Event trigger. A trigger function is a type of function which will invoked automatically when a specific type of event occur. Event loop. Once an event is triggered, the event loop looks at the object which event was triggered to see if an event handler has been defined by the developer for that particular event type, and forms the container for all the controls that make up the user interface. These are the key characteristics of event-driven programming languages. So now the question arises: what is the difference between the